All right, Holly. Well, it's good to meet you, first of all, and thank you for taking the time to chat with me and get in front of the platform that I get the privilege of helping with. I'd love to hear a little bit about you, give you a chance to introduce yourself, and tell us why you decided to run for school board this year.
Wonderful. It's great to see you too, Oscar. Thank you for hosting this forum. Beautiful Saturday morning. So today I get to do a lot more block walking and meeting with voters and getting out there. And so my name is Holly Ham, running for Humble ISD Board of Trustees, position 6. A little bit about me. Our family actually moved to this community and selected this school district because it is a very good school district. My husband and I have had decades around the greater Houston area. And when we moved back from Washington, D.C. to the Houston area, we decided not to stay on the west part of town and also looked at public schools instead of the private school where our students were being educated. There were changes at the private school as well. And a lot of those values were not aligning to ours any longer. And so there was a deep search for what type of school environment. And when we decided public schools, we looked at a lot of data. And so we've been here for almost 2 years. We moved here in the summer of 2021. So our kids are completing their second academic year. Our son is in 7th grade at Riverwood Middle School, and our daughter is in 4th grade at Deerwood Middle School. So we've enjoyed this community. We've met a number of really authentic and great friends and families. The community has really embraced us, and we've embraced this great community. So my professional background is 29 years of corporate experience. I'm a corporate executive running growth for a government contractor. I also have had the opportunity to serve as a presidential appointee. I served from 2017 to 2021 at the federal government level. Is the highest level of government at the agencies for the U.S. Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Commerce, Minority Business Development Agency, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and I also headed the White House Initiative for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. So serving the American people, just like you, was the greatest honor of a lifetime, an incredible privilege. I want to bring the corporate experience, the public service, the working across diverse cultures, diverse countries, diverse languages, and bring it to the local level. When we moved here, I was able to support the 2022 bond committee. I volunteered for the bond committee, and it was a superb experience. The administration did an incredible job with the organization, with the information. And at that time, I thought I learned a ton of information. In addition, I was selected to participate in the Community Leadership Academy from 21 to 22, and I was a graduate of the 2022 class. And that gave additional insight going behind the scenes on security, on finance, on the administration and the operations, and just looking at the way that from a different lens on how this district operates. And so the combination of the bond committee and CLA really gave me this insight that we made a good choice, right? Moving into this district where we didn't know anybody, making friends and having our kids really thrive. And so why am I running for school board? I believe that this is a good school district. And again, that's why my family is here. However, we do have challenges. We have challenges from the school board with transparency and governance to the classrooms. I'm running for school board again to bring almost 3 decades of the business, the technology, the transformation, the leadership, and the public service to help address our most complex challenges. And I believe those challenges include teacher retention, the rigor in our curriculum, and also ensuring that our students are prepared for post-graduation. And so I did mention our school board. I believe we need more transparency. We need that accountability to students, to parents, and our community. And so I can certainly speak to a lot more of those. I know you have a lot of other questions, but just a quick intro of who I am and why I'm running for position 6 on the school board.
All right. Well, thanks for taking the time to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your campaign. I'd like to dive into that a little bit. And on your website, which we'll link to a little bit later, you've got your top 4 priorities concerns. So let's start with that. Number 1 on that list, you list accountability. So expand on that a little bit. What do you mean by accountability? What's your concern there?
Absolutely. Thank you, Oscar. So ultimately, the accountability for our children's education resides with parents, and that can include guardians and grandparents. My husband and I believe that we are ultimately accountable for our children's exposure and our children's education. That means we're responsible for engaging as much as we can, other families, teachers, staff, faculty, principals, the administration, the school board. If we have a comment, if we have a concern, we want to be able to address that. But what our kids are exposed to in terms of curriculum, social and political ideas, that's ultimately our responsibility and accountability. And with that, the school board and the administration also has a lot of accountability for student success. So when the school board is accountable and when a trustee is elected by voters, there is an oath of office and a swearing in, the fiduciary responsibilities, the accountabilities to really ensure student success. And what does that mean? I believe the school board does need to have that accountability to parents. Listen to the families, listen to the concerns, address those concerns. And while some of these are very, very complex challenges, there needs to be some progress. There needs to be transparency in providing that feedback and or the input. And of course, the administration, right? The administration has a lot of very, very complex challenges. We looked at test scores, right? How TEA grades each of the schools, each one of the entire district. And so accountability is to parents again, being able to have that ear to listen and being able to address those concerns. And so ultimately, the family unit, the community and neighborhoods, and the school board and the administration are all accountable for our student success.
Now, you touched on transparency in your answer there, and that's actually the second priority you have listed on your website. And reading through that, it made me feel like possibly you feel like there's an opportunity there. So am I reading that right? Is there an opportunity for greater transparency in Humble ISD? And what does that look like if that's the case?
Absolutely. I just want to go back and share just my professional experience. I believe every organization needs to have a level of transparency that is appropriate. Well, we know with the school board, there's the Open Meetings Act. There's also fiduciary responsibilities that the school board members have to uphold their specific role as a trustee, but also what can they share? Of course, not all the information could be publicly shared. Now, there was, what actually triggered some concern for me was what had happened this summer. What actually did happen? Was there an attack on Board of Trustee Robert Scarfo? Yes, we know that there is a rule with the rotation of the officer positions. But what really happened? Why do we now have a rule change that allows for the president position to be actually elected and voted on? So I think parents have a right to know. And if that rule change had happened, what went on behind that? So I think the board needs to be transparent and be able to govern based on the oath of office that they had taken. So in addition, what is behind what students are learning? If parents are concerned about curriculum, if parents are concerned about what students are learning, the books that they're reading, I think we have a right to ask, and we have the right that the school, the administration provide that. And anytime there's a question, there should be that follow through, that transparency that this is what's happening. And I think in every organization, we owe it to the constituents, we owe it to, in this case, the voters, to provide that level of transparency.
Now, one thing you kind of mentioned in passing there was that relationship between the school board and the community, right? And one thing that we're hearing a lot about right now, for example, is limited time for commenters to talk, right? Public commenters to talk during public school board meetings. Is that something that needs to be addressed? And on top of that, generally speaking, how do you feel the relationship between the school board is with the community right now? What can be improved, if anything?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Oscar. So I can talk about my personal experience. Again, we've been in this district for less than 2 years. I would say that I have a good experience, and that started from the get-go. Again, when we looked at school districts and we narrowed it down to actually the top 3 in the greater Houston area, we went to visit them all. And then we looked at, where we would live and what the community would feel. And so there's a lot of publicly available data, but you have to be in front of potential, future neighbors. You have to be in front of the school district, for example, and you just drive around. But what we did was actually ask to meet with the superintendent. I emailed the superintendent. And I didn't get a chance to meet the superintendent, but I did meet with Dr. Roger Brown. So we had a chance to meet, and we met at one of the schools, and also at that time in early 2021, I also met with our future kids head of school and also the counselors. So that was from the get-go, I believe, a really good experience. And again, in the fall of 21, I served on the bond committee. I also serve in the Community Leadership Academy, and both of these were actually investments of time, both from the administration and from me just raising my hand to say, I want to volunteer. I want to be able to get involved. And for me, it was very grassroots. And I'll use that just to say, getting behind the scene, meeting with the teachers, the counselors, the administrative staff, the finance experts, and really getting behind some of this data. And I think data is very important because we need to look at it, not only to hear what's going on anecdotally, but look at the data and observe the data. And so again, I thought that was a great investment of time that allowed me to jump into a district that was new and also to meet the people. And again, I've had a positive interaction with the administration and the board. I was asked to speak at a board meeting in support of the 22 bond. I did so to showcase my support for the future capital investments. It was a huge bond. There was a lot of concerns about the price tag. It was very, very large. So I supported both Proposition A and Proposition B, knowing that this was the 6th fastest growing school district in the state of Texas, with over 1,000 school districts. This is a destination school district. And again, we were one of the families that selected this school district over some others. So that was a really good experience. However, again, I think what was disturbing and caught my attention more than just the regular monthly board meetings and some of the special board meetings was that attack on a trustee last summer and the rotation of the president position. So that was a concern for me. It seemed like a knee-jerk change. And again, what does the public need to know and what was not transparent? And so if the board is doing that, what is the board also not doing in terms of adherence to governments that could be impacting, our students, our classrooms, the teachers, the faculty, the staff? And so I know that as an elected official, there is a swearing into the oath of office, and I'm familiar with the integrity and being of the highest value and of utmost concern with all the responsibilities that a swearing in would mean in order to serve. And you mentioned, some of the policies around the culture. So limiting the 1 minute for guest speakers, I believe, is limiting our freedom of speech. Now, is it 2 minutes? Is it 3 minutes? Sometimes it's hard to get an idea or across, with all the details so that there could be some follow-up by the administration. So limiting it to 1 minute is actually limiting our freedom of speech. I believe that needs to change.
One other thing you mentioned in your previous answer, you mentioned books, and it was just for like 1 second. But I want to tap the brakes and talk about that a little bit because we're hearing about it a lot during this election season and really over the last year, maybe year and a half. And so we've got some candidates and we've got a segment of the community that is very concerned about books and materials that they say are in Humble ISD libraries that are inappropriate, maybe harmful in some cases. What are your thoughts around that? How do you think the district is handling it so far?
Yes, that is a really good question too, Oscar. And I don't believe, I've heard words such as polarizing. I don't think it's polarizing. Children that are exposed to inappropriate materials, it should not exist, right? Now, our kids are in elementary and middle school. We have not had that type of situation to deal with, right? We know what our kids are reading. Again, my husband and I, as parents, we really want to stay on top. We try to have the dinner conversations on how their school day went, the social interaction, and really stay on top of it. Now, that doesn't happen every day. It doesn't happen every week. And so it only takes one time, and it's hard to unsee something that a young child has seen. So yes, we try to stay on top of what our children are reading, what they're exposed to, and this includes social media. But with the books, what I have learned is the reconsideration form, and there's a process for it. Now, parents have told me that sometimes it takes a very long time, and the books are still on the bookshelves, and the kids know where to get access to it. And one child may check it out or have access to it and expose it to other children. I think we need to put a stop to that. And I don't know what the process is to actually, I don't know what the steps are to actually speed up that process, Oscar. But I do believe that especially sexual indoctrination and sexually exploited material need not be anywhere in an academic setting. May it be library, classroom, and especially social media. And of course, social media is a lot harder to actually pinpoint and control. But I do believe that they need not be in our classrooms because with these young, malleable minds, it's hard to unsee what they can see. And again, this is another one of those accountability issues. When it comes to sexually exploitation of our children, it need not be in the academic setting. And also, my husband and I will be the ones that introduce these topics. And while there is sexual education, that's very different from some of the topics that we're actually seeing that are concerning for parents in this setting.
Let's talk about the next part of your platform, which is strong schools. And I want to tie that into an area that's on a lot of people's minds right now, which is school safety. And that's a little bit dual faceted, right? We've got some internal issues, maybe bullying or fighting, and then we've got external threats, right? So let's talk about both of those for a moment. Let's start with the internal things, bullying, fighting. How do we feel the district is doing so far? Are there improvements to be made? What would that look like if it was up to you?
So, Oscar, throughout this campaign, I have met so many parents, grandparents, guardians, and those grandparents have had children that went through the district, and now they have little toddlers that will be into the district. And so they've been here for decades. They've also seen some of the changes just in our social media life. I've also met with a lot of teachers, and teachers have a lot of concerns. So, kind of inside and outside the classroom, I have heard from a lot of students also as young as middle school about the bullying and the cyberbullying, right? The physical bullying that's always been there, as long as we've had schools. I mean, just the social pressures and just the social aspect of being in an environment, and cyberbullying too. I think we really need to address how social media and technology plays in the school environment. I know that our son in middle school, they can have access to their phones, and they're actually using their phones for Schoology. A lot of the materials are actually online now. They're doing their homework and they're actually taking tests online. And so does that mean we take those phones away and we offer them Chromebooks instead? I think that's a question for technology and the funding that's available to it. But no doubt about it, the technology, especially the phones, are kind of here to stay. And I think it goes back to parents. Are we teaching our children how to use this technology responsibly, right? So that social media doesn't need to be there. But kids will be kids, right? They're going to urge each other on. And so we really need to be pay very close attention to what the kids are exposed to and have those kids bring that information, one, to it could be a trusted teacher, it could be a faculty member or a counselor, it could be a friend, and obviously it could be us as parents, right? Let's talk about that. What is going on? Who is sending what? What are these images? I think we need to stay on top of that so that there can be that adult intervention as necessary. I also think if I can switch gears then and talk about the other aspect of school safety. Going back to the CLA, I had a chance to actually go behind the scenes, and not so much like, okay, well, this is our monitoring room. But Director of Security, Dean Herbst, I think he's doing a fabulous job. And while I'm not an expert on that, and I don't have the experience to compare, this school district versus another school district, my understanding is that we're staying ahead many, many steps of the perpetrators. Of course, that's always not going to be the case because people are going to come up with ways to infiltrate if they want to. But if we are doing what we can and using the technology and the tools, then I, as a parent, will feel safe. I don't have that job. I don't know. Again, I can't compare this district to others. And I know that some of the candidates are running on programs around armed law enforcement, especially at the elementary schools. But as a parent, and from what I can see, I feel that my children are safe. Now, we never would want anything to happen, just like what we've seen in other school districts and most recently the Nashville shooting. But nonetheless, I do believe that our children are safe. Now, the minute I say that and something were to happen, of course, it would break our hearts in the community. But in terms of the law enforcement background, that's not something that I have. And I want to put trust in the people that we put in those positions so that they can keep our students and our physical buildings and academic settings safe.
I do want to get your thoughts on one specific thing that we're hearing a lot about in this election season, which is the idea of implementing something like the Guardian program or the Marshall program, where we might be arming teachers or other staff that are in the schools right now. Your thoughts on something like that?
So I think arming teachers is a disastrous decision. And here's why. Unless it is a teacher that says, this is what I want to do. Teachers have so many demands. And in fact, teacher retention is an issue that I do want to touch on. But teachers have so many demands. And we know that teachers are leaving the profession too. At a macro level, there's teachers leaving the profession, and it's not just retirement. And then we also don't have enough teachers in the pipeline that are going through the education process or the pipeline of teachers. So the question is, who will be teaching our students? And I think we're going to have that very, very limited supply for the growing demand of more students in our district and other districts as well. But the teachers that I've spoken to, they're stressed. They have a lot of activities, things to do, but not enough time. And so while the classroom size is sometimes manageable in some schools and other times is exceeding, your high 20s and into the 30s in terms of student teacher ratio. And so I believe arming teachers creates that additional stress. And if I was in that position, it just means how and when and what ifs. And so, just to conclude there, I believe arming teachers it could lead to disastrous situations. Now, I do support armed law enforcement in some capacity. Does that mean we're going to shift some funding so that all the elementary schools will have that, just like the middle and high schools? I think that's up for discussion when it comes to budgetary season. Does it also mean that some schools have it and others don't? So how that's decided. But I believe having that presence actually is a really good idea. So our daughter goes to Deerwood Elementary, and I have a watchdogs program, and DOGS is Dads of Great Students. And I found that actually to be incredibly helpful. And I've seen the male figures at the elementary school and also getting dads involved because, you have a lot of parents, and typically it's the mothers that are involved, and you see the mothers that are around, and not just part of the PTA, but just parents in general when it comes time to getting involved with your kids' schools. To have those male figures, it's really, it's great. It's great for the kids to actually connect with the male figures, not only with the student being there on the student in the school, but also for dads to go throughout an entire day if they're allowed, that time and their availability to see what the school day is like, being there in the lunchroom, arrival and dismissal. And so having the male figure, I believe, is also another aspect of school safety that I think we should expand throughout the school district.
I do have a couple other topics I'd love to chat with you about, but I know safety is a big topic. Anything else you want to mention before I move forward?
I do, Oscar. I just want to mention that I believe that the school district's doing a great job with the iHelp program. It's phenomenal. The anonymity, so students can actually call and self-report and or see something, say something. This could be a student to another student, a faculty member, and of course they have other ways to report as well. And so keep that up. Again, going through CLA, I know every one of these calls is obviously investigated. And this is what we need to do. We need to be accountable for one another in the school setting. Students can help each other out, and neighbors can help each other out. So great program with iHelp.
All right. Now, you did mention employee retention in that last topic when we were talking about the potential solutions around safety. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that. What are some things we can do to increase it? How do we feel the district is already doing as far as valuing and retaining great educator talent? And are there any improvements to be made from your perspective?
In my experience, retention and especially retaining good talent is always hard. Again, in the 29 years of experience I've had just leading teams and looking at, why people leave. And I just want to go back to a word that you use, which is culture, right? What is the culture between, for example, the board and administration and then to the community and parents and students? And I think we need to have that culture of support. We all know the challenges that teachers have, right? And also I spoke about where we don't have enough pipeline of professionals in the teaching arena. And then we also have not only retirees, but also teachers, experienced teachers that are leaving the profession. So what do we need to do with that? I think it is about relationships and accountability. The administration hires teachers. It also provides teachers with the resources to be able to teach. The teachers are burning out. They're stressed. And it's not just a 7 to 3 job from what I hear, right? Teachers have a lot of homework also. They're grading. I spoke to a teacher recently. And while this is not an everyday event, from 6 to 10 p.m., she was grading papers. And so just imagine, right, if it's 6 to 10 p.m. grading the papers, maybe other nights it's also preparing. And so teachers have a lot of demands in today's world. It's that portrait of a graduate where we want to have some individual learning for each one of the students. And that can also be very difficult depending on the class size. So again, lots of demands on teachers. How do we retain good teachers? If teachers are doing well, we need to highlight that. We need to not only pat the teacher in the back, but maybe provide a bonus if that's possible, right? And while we know that teachers don't go into the profession to retire well and retire early, sometimes that it helps, right? To have a little bit of that financial reward and also highlight what that teacher's doing. Maybe it's innovative. Maybe it helps other teachers in the same situation, but in a different school. And so I think more collaboration with the teachers. And then I just want to share that when I served in Washington, D.C., and our kids went to school there, they actually went to a public elementary school that had a teacher-student ratio of about 2 to 20. And so that class size is, 10 students to 1, for example. And the way that they did it was there was one school employee that was a teacher, and then they had an assistant. That assistant and the funding for that assistant was actually raised by the family in the schools. And now I know our schools have a number of fundraisers. Would that be sufficient? Perhaps we can start out with a part-time, one assistant that can span 3 classes, 2 classes. And then over time, if that really helps, they could be a full-time. So I've seen it done. And I know that relieves a teacher from so many activities, preparation, classroom management. So I think we really need to focus on what is stressing teachers out, why they're leaving the profession, and how can we retain them? We got to create that culture of supporting them, giving them the autonomy, especially those that have taught long enough to know how to deal with, say, from the 2nd graders to the 7th graders to the high schoolers. They know their profession, and we want to be able to support them in doing so.
You mentioned earlier you volunteered on the bond committee. You were an outspoken supporter of the 2022 bond. Also on your website, your 4th pillar or your 4th priority is fiscal responsibility. So tell me about how those offset. What does fiscal responsibility look like for you if you're on the board for Humble ISD?
Well, first of all, I'm not a rubber stamper, and I do like to look at data. And while I'm not an accountant, I'm not a comptroller, I know how to read budgets, and I've had that experience. And so I will question, does this line item need to be there? And does this line item need to be at this dollar value? So I know that's going to take a lot of work. If I get elected, there's just going to be a transition period, right? There's going to be a lot of new information and also building rapport and relationship with the rest of the board and also administration staff. But nonetheless, I do take that responsibility very seriously. I do that now in my profession, looking at budgets and ensuring that every single line item is where it should be, and I can justify that. And so for one, I'm not a rubber stamper. And for two, I want to raise my hand and ask the question, do we need this? Is it within the budget? Do we need this? And do we need this amount? And also, do we need it at this point in time? So yes, while I supported the bond, because this is a growing district and because we have overcrowding in schools and we have the growth in the southern part of the district, how do we alleviate some of that growth? And so these are capital projects that are planned over years, if not more than a decade. And so we have $1.5 billion of debt. I've also learned again through the bond committee and also through CLA that this district is very, very responsible. Right? When we sell those bonds, how we pay off those bonds, and also our AAA plus rating, right, on managing those bonds and paying off our debt. And so I also have learned from Robert Scarfo, back in 2013, he talks about this, about his accomplishments and actually introducing programs to actually pay off the debt, and also that reduces our interest. And so if we have ideas like that and we're able to implement and we're responsible, that goes directly to taxpayers like you and I and other families in the district. And so again, being fiscally responsible means paying attention, asking the questions, and also making sure that we're spending every dollar appropriately. I'm as you can tell, a social and fiscal conservative. I want to make sure not only for us is that the dollars are going to students, the dollars are going into teachers, the dollars are going into the teaching profession itself. So that again, we're grooming our students to be able to learn, to think critically, and to ensure that they have their successes going through this school district. And then once they're a little bit older, right, and they are young adults, they're able to make those decisions because they have that great foundation of a good education.
You mentioned there kind of your general philosophy. You mentioned you're social and fiscal conservative. I would love to ask, this is a question I got from the community to ask candidates. So we've all got our social bubbles, right? I've got mine, you've got yours. And all these positions that we're running for, they're at large positions. So what are you doing as a candidate to make sure you're getting feedback from and hearing the voice of people that aren't in your normal social bubble?
Well, Oscar, as I had stated, when we moved to this district, we didn't know any other students. We didn't know any of the families. And so, we took a chance, but we also knew that there was good data backing this district. And so as we met other families, may it be at the grocery store or some of the events that our kids participated in, it was really just to get to know people, right? We don't want to talk politics. We don't want to talk about certain topics that are, sometimes a little bit touchy. And so for me, it's really getting to know people. And I know throughout my childhood and upbringing and also career, I've had the fortune of being in diverse cultures, diverse languages, and really just looking at the individual as an individual and not about political ideas or social conservatism or not. And so throughout this campaign, we've blocked from the north part of the district, which includes a little bit of Porter, down to the south. We've been in neighborhoods that I know I haven't been able to get to in the almost 2 years that we've been here. We've been in Walden. We've been in the Groves. We've been in Woodstream. We've been to so many different neighborhoods. I also welcome parents to come and visit with me. So every Sunday from 4 to 5 p.m., I have what I call office hours. It's a Zoom meeting. And I've had some interesting conversations. And these are parents that come from all over the district, and also grandparents that may not be in the district, but they know that they wanted to just talk to a candidate like me because they still have children and grandchildren that are in the district and their children raising the grandchildren in the district. And so this allows me just to talk parent to parent or parent to grandparent. And this isn't about my conservative values. This is about those concerns of, is the classroom getting enough teacher attention? Are the teachers really teaching the students for success? Is the school safe? Are the books there appropriate? Are they learning science and history as science and history should be learned? And so these are the topics we talk about. And I don't ever go into the first question is, well, which side of the fence do you vote in? Because school board, as you know, is nonpartisan. We need to focus on those complex issues that really drive student success.
I want to give you a chance to kind of make that final pitch, if you will. But before I do that, I've obviously asked several questions. Are there any topics that I maybe forgot to mention or didn't mention that you want to make sure we touch on before we wrap up our time together?
There is. I've mentioned a few times about ensuring student success, especially post-graduation. I have seen, though, that there's not a lot of focus on financial education and sometimes called financial literacy. And so I know for a fact as a parent, when my child is ready and whatever path that our children take, that we want them to understand the value of a dollar and also what does it mean to be financially literate. So just as a background, about 10 to 11 years ago, I served on an organization called Skills for Living. And Skills for Living's mission is to break the cycle of poverty. And we do that by educating, mentoring, and actually hand-holding families. And it's typically a single parent family working multiple jobs to provide for their family. And along with that is Financial Mentors of America, a sister organization. So we couple the Skills for Living curriculum with the financial education. And it's as basic as get a bank account, learn how to balance a checkbook. And when that dollar is earned, how much of it goes into just day-to-day expenses, including housing, food, and clothing? And then how much of it can you save? And how much of, if you aren't able to save it now, what kind of pay would it take to actually start saving? And of course, saving compounds. And so, from now to 10 years to 20 years. And so there's basic financial education that I believe our students need, so that while they may not be able to manage their own income yet, they understand the value of that dollar that's earned. And it could be through part-time job. There is a curriculum in the state of Texas called Real Life Financial Math. It's taught over 50,000 Texas school students. It's a 1-year critical thinking, problem solving, and it is a very tough curriculum. But when students come out of that, they plan for their future. And while they may not have that part-time job or full-time job, they're thinking ahead, because it's that critical thinking. The choices that I make today financially impacts what that future is going to look like.
All right. I want to give you that chance, like I said, to make that final pitch. And you've probably heard me say, I appreciate anybody that's willing to put all this time and effort and resources into running for what is essentially a volunteer position. That's the end goal, is to become a volunteer. And so I appreciate you and anybody that's running. And in your position, you're running for position 6. You've got the incumbent running, you've got another challenger running, and of course, yourself. Tell our community, why should we vote for Holly Ham for this position?
Well, thank you, Oscar, for the time spent with you this morning. Again, it's Saturday. It's a beautiful Saturday morning. I'm going to be knocking on some doors with the team. I just want to say we have an amazing team that are supporting me, but it's more so supporting the values that I believe that I can bring to this school board. So please visit hollyforhumbleisd.com. Learn more about me. Oscar, you touch on the 4 areas I'm passionate about: accountability, transparency, strong schools, and fiscal responsibility. And this is how I want to serve this district. I want to bring almost 30 years of professional business, public service, and leadership skills. I want to bring that to the local level. To be able to serve at the highest level of government, and the American people, which is a very large population, has taught me so much about how to come together, how to listen, how to take complex issues and actually break it down into piece parts so that we can manage it. And while you can't solve a problem in a short period of time, by doing so, you can show progress. And we do have some complex challenges that are very similar to other school districts, but we should be able to do that. I mentioned that every Sunday I do have office hours. It's from 4 to 5 p.m. Please visit my website and you can see the link. I've listened to many parents. I've listened to grandparents, and we've just discussed issues. It's just a time for me to be able to listen and for others to get to know me. As far as endorsements, I've been endorsed at the local level. I've also been endorsed by the formal federal officials that I worked with at the Department of Education, at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And I've been endorsed by Sister Dee Dee Byrne, a Catholic sister in Washington, D.C. So I am asking for your vote, all those that are viewing this. Your vote means that experienced leadership, almost 30 years. And this is not just by some of the fancy titles. This is experienced leadership that I want to bring to this district. And your vote also means unwavering condition. And I will serve again with those conservative values. And I believe in my experience as an immigrant and blessings that I've had, those conservative values have attributed to my successes in life. And I will serve with tireless compassion. And this is for our children's education and their future. And so again, I will fight to protect those traditional conservative family values for student success, our students, your students, and mine. So it's been an incredible honor to serve the American people at the highest level of federal government. And I want to be able to serve you all on the school board here in Humble.
Well, Holly, thank you again for your time and how gracious you were answering all these questions, getting in front of this platform. Best of luck in your race. I look forward to talking to you again, but I just want to make sure I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Oscar.